This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I am taping from the TWA Hotel at JFK. And I encourage everyone to go here. It's a landmark icon, and you'll know every word to every song. And going from TWA, which was the old school, most authoritative airline in the world, which landmarked their own building, we are going to Sesame Order, where Josh Morgan is going to turn that same landmark into better for you foods, beverages, lifestyle choices at the fingertips of every consumer. So Josh, with that big objective, please tell us your background and how you're going to get there.
How y'all doing? Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. I'm a career restaurant guy. I've been in hospitality almost my whole professional life, fell in love early in my career with the hospitality industry and worked for some really great companies like Hillstone, formerly known as Houston's Restaurant Group, the Nomad. And for the past 10 years, I've been a partner at a company called Orify Brands based here in Manhattan. And we've been building and incubating great fast casual brands with the hopes of scaling them. And it's a fun industry. I think once you're in the restaurant space, it's probably like fitness and, it just becomes it's in your blood. It's about, connecting with consumers and creating these amazing experiences that in some cases last a lifetime. So that's my, kind of history. And Sesame came about in a, post-COVID world because, we started to just think about, how fundamentally challenging being in the restaurant business is. And even when times are good, it's hard. But in the face of things like COVID, we just kind of came to the realization that, we needed to make some changes. So Sesame was kind of a response to the challenges that we've had as restaurant operators fighting against the aggregators and Silicon Valley and big tech kind of monopolizing our off-premise business. And post-COVID, our off-premise went from, sub 10% of our total sales to 60, 70, 80%. And when you're paying 30% commissions, which effectively, when you think about it, if you're paying 30% commission on 80% of your sales, it's effectively like you have an equity partner, except They didn't invest in it.
Well, that's like the Apple Store. When people say, "Oh, the Apple Store's worth this," I'm like, they own 30% of the revenue, not the equity. They own off the top, right?
Totally. It's like
thousands of companies. So
it's like Kevin. It reminds me of Kevin O'Leary on Shark Tank. He's always trying to take top line, royalties on everything. But it's problematic. And post COVID, it was almost like a wake up call. Like, no, we didn't like it before. And we tried to, fight back a little bit, but post-COVID, it's like, no, we got to like really band together and try to create a more sustainable option.
Could we just talk about that business for a second? Because not only are they taking 30% from you, but there's more and more line items below the line. And also, I think a lot of the restaurants now are modifying their prices. So it's higher priced to compensate for that 30%, right?
Yeah, no, look, there's all sorts of things. I mean, first of all, there's a history of predatory practices that these aggregators have taken to kind of get to where they are. Mm-hmm. And, it's pretty gross, some of the things like, for instance, putting up virtual phone numbers in Google search that would intercept consumers trying to find, one of our brands. And, a consumer thinks they're calling the restaurant, but in fact, it's this like virtual number. They've been sued by, various states and municipalities. And so some ugly stuff at the heart of it. Not to suggest that all of them, are using constant predatory practices, but there's a history of it, which led to a lot of contentiousness. But to your point, Pete, yeah, there's transaction fees. There's this idea of, they kind of sold us on, hey, we're going to bring you all new customers. But then when you start looking into it, you realize they're actually taking all of your existing in-house customers, which are your big profit centers, right? Like our customers that come into our restaurant, like that's where we make our money. And when they start getting cannibalized, it's devastating. So there's a lot of stuff. And the other point you mentioned, you're right. Like because of these high commissions for so long, that's 30%, restaurants started to pass those through to the consumer in the form of menu price premiums. So a lot of times consumers are paying nowadays 20%, 25% menu premiums just because they're using DoorDash or Grubhub. Right. And it's because the restaurants are just passing it through. So it ends up being very costly to both the restaurant and the consumer.
So when you looked at Sesame, you were focused on the healthy lifestyle and focused on basically trying to, rejigger how people think about, what their choices are up front on the top. Obviously I use DoorDash and it has like a healthy icon, but there's really not much of like a decision tree or much data behind that. So what were the frustrations that you were solving? And, with data, with your own, people in the market knowing like what's healthy, what's not for you. They don't put calorie counts on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Also, there's serving sizes, which is another thing that Dave Gannell and I are going to go after, the serving size community, because I think that's all ridiculous that, you got to have a multiplication table on the grams of sugar that you're putting in your body.
It's so confusing. Why does it have to be so confusing? Yeah, I mean, so at the heart of our core value system, I think has always been this notion of just total transparency around cost and pricing, and always being, upfront and honest with, where the data is going and who gets access to the data, who's getting paid on these various line items when you transact on e-commerce that can be so confusing to the consumer. And also, transparency that extends to, the types of food and, how healthy it is, and, things like calorie counts. And I believe that as a restaurateur, it's always in our best interest to be, open and honest with our guests, because that kind of, generates, long-term brand affinity and trust, and ultimately loyalty, which is what we all want. So, so we've kind of tackled that at the first layer of, open data and open access. So when a consumer orders on Sesame, what typically happens in the current version is DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats, they hoard that data and they do not give it to the restaurants, right? So Sesame's approach is complete transparency. When a consumer orders on Sesame, it's not our data. We have access to it, but it's an open data model so that those same restaurants can learn more about their customer. And this is, you mentioned data, because honestly, it always boils down to data and using that to make, business decisions. And, restaurants need to understand like who's ordering, what they're ordering, what type of menu items, where those menu items are being delivered to, so that they can, better attract the right consumer segment. So one of our brands, Little Beat and Little Beat Table, is a gluten-free, health food concept. And we were one of the first in the space. But this was like 2013, 2014, when kind of the idea of gluten-free as like a scalable concept really didn't exist. And, we've really amassed an amazingly loyal audience, people who have all sorts of dietary restrictions and aversions, and they come to us because they know they can trust us. So, it extends into that transparency about items and, understanding our customers, knowing who they are, and being able to, us at Sesame to help Little Beat and the brand target those people.
Gotcha. So when you take a look at, we spend a lot of time in the health club industry, which are sitting on unbelievable amounts of data. If you can slice it and dice it correctly and actually have some conclusions and then take actions based on those conclusions. But there was never, a graphical way that it was done to actually tell you like, okay, this is what this means, and this is what you should do about it. So there's a company called Fitness BI, a business intelligence, that, basically took all the data out of one of the largest billing companies and put it into, bar charts and graphs, and then turned it into the ability to gamify, different sales teams against each other, different clubs against each other, and actually turn the data into a useful tool. So the useful data in the health club industry is now helping these owners actually make decisions, where before they were just kind of looking at it in a Monday morning meeting, say like, okay, that's great, but there was no action done after that. So, you've got a lot of restaurants that are sole proprietorships, or they're small companies. They probably don't have a data scientist on their staff. Right? They probably, So as you deliver this data to these restaurants, are you also basically telling them, look, this is how you're going to optimize your business and how I'm going to help you do that? Are you almost like a value added, resource for them? Or how do you think about that?
That's the intent, we're still startup, right? So we're just kind of getting going and learning a lot, but yes, under the kind of auspices of total transparency, data is important, but for most independent mom and pop and, operators, like they don't have the sophistication required to take a lot of data and interpret it. So Sesame, the intention of Sesame was always to provide a little bit of what maybe Fitness BI can provide. The more data we get, that we can kind of, generate it in ways that restaurateurs can make sense of, all within like a back-end dashboard. Where we see it going is not just, being able to provide the data in a way that helps, independent restaurateurs understand, but to be transparent about what's happening across the industry. And again, to to compare this to how it works now, right? Like Grubhub, Uber, they all have crazy amounts of data, but they're very restrictive with it. They don't give access to like, hey, what's the best selling menu item in your zip code right now? Because that's information that might be helpful to know, like what trends are and like how things are moving.
Yeah. Well, in the supermarket grocery industry, people are getting those reports off of the receipts that are being aggregated of what's selling, what market share by brand, by size, by category. I'll think of the name of it there. So you're basically saying that the suppliers don't have any data of what's going on after that meal leaves their restaurant.
Exactly. Well, they have some data on just what's happening in their four walls or in their limited ecosystem, but to get data about what's happening across the whole macro environment, which fast casual concepts are doing, certain volumes, like which menu items are selling the best, which menu items might be selling the best in certain areas. That's all type of macro data that we believe can be super beneficial to the restaurant industry writ large. And again, we want to be able to provide kind of this open access to data, and some of it might have to be anonymized, but again, like the current model does not support that. They're so restrictive with their data because they just, they want to monetize it in every way they can. So yes, like I think that's a good comparison to, even though I don't know much about fitness BI, it sounds very similar to kind of how we've always thought of data and being able to, arm restaurateurs with it.
In the hotel space, there's something called Smiths. And what they do is they will go down to the street level. And if there's, 4 hotels there's a hotel on each corner, and they will go back every week and they'll say, this was the average daily rate. This was the vacancy rates. And they've got some other KPIs, and they're actually able to get it down to that 4 corners. And if you look at hotels.com and you go on there, there's got to be a little bit of like, let's just use the word price fixing because I can't come up with anything better, right? But like you can tell, like
price fixing is top of mind right now.
there's no way that all these hotels know that there's some conference that's in town and like, here's what the supply demand is going to look like. There's somebody feeding that information to them, and I'm sure it's probably hotels.com and Expedia, and they're basically like rising the floor because they're getting a percentage of that rate, and they kind of know that, okay, here's like the clearing price where you should listen to us and we'll kind of price your rooms for you. Because it could go like from like $129 up to like $499 for like the Garden Inn. On like 28th and 6th. Like there's no way someone is sitting at the front desk or the general manager say, I think it's $499 tonight. Like I just feel like, I got off the subway. There's a lot of people here. Right. So somebody feeding them this intelligence. When you take a look at what you're trying to do with Sesame though, are you basically saying, hey, look, there's certain types of foods that are trending right now. Here's where they're priced. You should be selling more, rotisserie chicken as an example. Or, avocados, like anything with an avocado, you get an extra $3 for. What give me some examples?
Look, that's the exact implication. Like one of the ideas we always had, we haven't launched it yet, but it was something that was always compelling to us is, when you go on Google and you do like Google flights, and you're searching for flights and a price pops up, and then there's this like little spectrum that says, hey, you're, 60% above what this flight would normally go to, so it's like, it's just and even Amazon, Amazon was always fairly good at kind of breaking down, like, what is the cost of this item per ounce, or, it just puts it in relative terms for the consumers to understand. So we always envision being able to offer that for the restaurateur. So let's say a sandwich concept that's serving, a fried chicken sandwich, and they can see data to say, hey, our fried chicken sandwich is priced, 15% below, the majority of restaurateurs that are serving similar, fried chicken sandwiches, right? So they can get an understanding of their competitive set. There's always cost plus pricing in restaurants. You always want to make sure you're hitting your food cost, targets, but there's also competitive pricing, what's going on in the environment, and the fragmentation of this industry is just so great that it's impossible for a restaurant to really understand what's going on, again, in that macro environment without, transparent data.
Right. So you've got some really big players. Some of them public, some of them, combined, but still have their separate brands. So you think that there's more competition, there's not. so they're wielding a pretty big, stick, and there's a lot of scale that's required in a delivery business, and the marketing that goes in there. And, those Uber Eats commercials where I don't know who does that, but I would not pick that ad agency. However, when you take a look at what you're doing as a startup company and saying, I've got a lens on what's going to happen and what needs to happen. And these other companies are kind of focused on, just driving their revenue growth. They're not thinking about what do my customers, which are really the restaurants, right? They got two customers. They got the restaurants and they got the consumer. Where do you fit into that, and how do you kind of stake out your lane?
So it's a great question. And, we think a lot about, where the industry is. We certainly feel that it's unsustainable, right? Like the current Web 2, model of marketplaces it's just not sustainable. And the reason is because these guys have spent billions and billions of dollars acquiring, through, cost of acquisition, both supply and demand, and they need to return, money on all of that investment, which has been subsidized by Wall Street. And as you guys know, a lot of these companies haven't been able to turn a profit at all, so they're losing a tremendous amount of money, just gaining market share, profit be damned. And in order to get a return on that, they have to be highly extractive, right? They have to extract value from either the merchant or the consumer. And that's what's happening. And it kind of ebbs and flows. They take more from the restaurant, they end up taking more from the consumer, and they keep going. So how I'm thinking about this and what we're really excited about, I referenced Web 2.0. With Web 3 now, there's all this technology, fundamentally like blockchain type technology that allows businesses to do things that we might think of as like a cooperative. Like when we first founded Sesame, the idea was, what if we created a cooperative where all the merchants on the platform actually had a piece of the pie? They were actual, shareholders. And now
I'm just working on something the other day where this guy was thinking about doing a franchise, and then we talked about doing a license, and then we kind of came up as we're in the car, dropped me off at the airport. I'm like, what you really want to do is you just want to create an old school co-op, and everyone's kind of bought in, and they're all driving towards the same goals, and you'll get your management fee out of it, which is basically your franchise fee. But like ShopRite has like the largest purchasing, like the distribution centers owned by the co-ops.
Yeah, exactly. And look, they're effective mainly because they result if they're created right and properly. There's aligned incentives across all participants, right? And in Web 2, like all of the restaurants, the couriers, the consumers, the restaurant team members, they're all contributing value to this network, and all that value is being extracted and sent to Wall Street. So Sesame's ideation is really, what if we created this kind of decentralized Web 3, ecosystem where all of those same players actually had a stake in the company, and they became shareholders, and
I just want to reference one thing, because we talk about this in our Halo Academy. A lot of companies that you're referencing, they're either technology companies or marketplaces. They're valued at multiples of revenue, right? They're not full because they don't have any EBITDA. And even if they had EBITDA, they'd still be valued at a multiple revenue.
Yep.
So what I want people to think about is, in the health club industry or in other industries, if you're giving someone a revenue stream that's a multi-year contract, whether they're running your mission critical software, they're running your Salesforce. If Salesforce.com sells a $10 million account to, Orify, and that value of their stock, it stays at like 6 times revenue, they just created $60 million of value, right, for their shareholders. Going back to your co-op idea is to say, hey, look, if I'm a customer of yours and you're basically arbitraging my contract, right, in the public markets, why don't you give me, $10 million of the stock for me to sign up on this contract, because you're going to arb me 40 million, right?
Yeah. So
people don't think about like the business models that are out there are being valued differently. Maybe it all comes down to earth at some point, but I doubt it in our lifetime. So it's interesting to think about, like, is my business model more valuable than your business model? Your business model doesn't exist unless I go on it. Right?
Yeah.
Somebody said to me one time, they're like, I'm independently wealthy. I'm like, no, you're dependently wealthy, right? Because you depend on your customers, you depend on the bank to take the money in, you depend on the police to keep you safe. No one's independently anything. So anyway, getting back to where you were before, though, setting up a co-op or sharing this data, that might be aspirational, because I've been talking about this for years in the health club industry. Like, let's all take these brands, put them into like a royalty. Everyone's going to own a piece of the royalty, or like in the movie industry, they're like, they crowdsourced all the screens and then they created a company, National Cinemedia. So could you set up a co-op? I mean, you set up a co-op with thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, no. There's definitely ways to do it. What's interesting is when we talk to, our restaurant partners, and we kind of, proffer this idea of like, them being a stakeholder, and there's different ways to slice this, to slice this, this pie. But,
right.
With Web3 and blockchain, like there are companies out there. There's this great company called Brain Trust that I've been following. And it's a true like use case, real life example of a Web3 marketplace that matches talent with companies. So it's in the talent space, and they've been doing phenomenally well. And their value proposition essentially is like, kind of what we're doing. Like companies, you can spend less on acquiring talent. The talent can go to a place where not only can they find great companies, but they actually are rewarded and incentivized through, kind of having a piece of this pie. And it's kind of incredible to see that things that had seemed, more aspirational and like, kind of altruistic are actually being done. And they're, it's kind of creating this incentive-based flywheel that is working, and they're competing just like we're competing against the, DoorDashes of the world. They're going against, Upworks and like Fivers, of the world. So
explain to me how the economics of that work. You're saying the contractor or the employee is getting a percentage of something that.
So the way in Web3 it works, it's through tokenization, right? So you kind of create a native token model, Yeah. So imagine we have think like a loyalty system, right? Like everybody has loyalty systems or rewards programs. And so Sesame, in theory, and we haven't done this yet. These are all kind of just like ideas and things that we're seeing in the industry. By the way, NFTs and like blockchain, web, all that stuff is starting to find its way into the restaurant space. I think across many industries. As an example, Starbucks, and Shake Shack are launching loyalty programs, with NFTs. And there's this. Gary Vaynerchuk launched this company called Flyfish, which is kind of the first NFT membership only restaurant. So it's kind of starting to, pop into the.
That's the one I heard of. Maybe you told me about that one.
Yeah, maybe I had mentioned it, but again, so there's this tokenization. So we kind of create this like loyalty system with Sesame, coins, and a consumer that places orders on Sesame or refer consumers, couriers that execute delivery under certain time standards, restaurants that promote Sesame to their to their, fan base, all of these behaviors that create more value in the network, they get rewarded by getting these points, right? But the difference between a traditional, maybe loyalty point with like, gold stars and like, and red balloons, this one is a liquid market, right? Because blockchain, enables kind of that type of liquidity to be created. So not only is it have, potential redeemable qualities within the network, like benefits or access to certain features, but it also is a digital asset that in theory, as this network grows and scales, it becomes more and more value.
Mm-hmm. So fast forward 6 months, 12 months from now, what do you think the consumer offering and the partner offering is to sign up on the Sesame platform? And who is that either taking market share away from, or who are you leapfrogging?
So it's a good question. We're currently, just to, for people listening, we're in kind of a prototype mode. We've been in this like beta launch in Manhattan. We have about 250 restaurants on the platform itself. We're in a limited geography from 34th Street down to Houston, east to west, but we've got a great range of just amazing restaurants, the whole spectrum from fast casual to full service, just really, really great brands. And then I think in the next.
And you're transferring the transaction and making that user interface and more knowledgeable for the consumer. Are you actually handling the delivery as well?
Yeah, so Sesame itself does not do the actual logistics. Instead, we partner with fulfillment only company here in New York called Relay, who through our experience, and again, we're restaurateurs, right? So we've kind of battle tested all of these things. We've been working with them for 7 years, and they are hands down the best executors of delivery, mainly because that's all they do. So we have a partnership with them. So all the orders come in through Sesame. We inject them directly into the restaurant. So it's seamless operationally. We simultaneously send it to Relay to fulfill. And then we track all the times and the data, so we know how quickly these things are being ordered. By the way, this is how good they are. In all of Manhattan, their average time from the time a courier goes to a restaurant and grabs the bag to handing it off to the consumer at their door in their apartment is 12 minutes. Average.
So I referenced this on our intro call the other day, but if we could do like a gambling of the Sesame Relay delivery guys, and the under over is 12 minutes, and then you can place a bet on like when your friend gets their order, and we'll blockchain the whole thing.
Exactly.
And then those guys will turn into like the next Tour de France, delivery edition.
Betting on the horses. Yeah, totally. But where we see ourselves in the next, 3, 6, 9 months is, we're starting to scale, so we're starting to increase our geographic boundaries. We expect to cover, all of Manhattan and start to get into, some of the boroughs. Again, we're doing a lot of work, just talking to great restaurants. So we've got a wait list of, hundreds of restaurants to get onto the platform, which is a great sign. And then, I expect us to really start to explore and, execute some of these ideas of, this kind of we're calling it kind of eat to earn, as like a loyalty system, but based on and predicated on this notion that all these other companies are extracting value from all participants. And there's a better system that can actually pass that value back to, all of those contributors. And it might seem a little out there, but you know what, like, there's a lot of anti-conglomerate sentiment, against people, like whether it's Instagram, Amazon, DoorDash, people that, feel like they're being taken advantage of, and, on both sides, like it sets the stage for disruption. And I think DoorDash and those guys are starting to feel, the pressure. And the other, thing to note is that there's no way, like, that's a competitive moat that we would have against the incumbents. Like, there's no way DoorDash, Facebook, Amazon are just going to give up 50% of their company, in favor of incentivizing all of the contributors of value. Right. They just can't do it. They need to make a return on these massive investments. So it's something they really can't do. And as a nimble new startup that is passionate about really creating true sustainability for this industry that I think consumers really value, we can really push the boundaries.
There's one thing I want to give you a shout out on, and I want all the entrepreneurs on here to listen. When you talked about your growth strategy, you said, I'm going to go into, Houston to 34th Street. And then I'm going to go higher up, and I'm going to cover Manhattan, and I'm going to go to the boroughs. We have people come in with their ideas and they say, I'm going to go to New York, then I'm going to go to Boston, I'm going to go to Philly, and I'm going to go to Miami, and I'm going to go to Los Angeles. And it's like the density in New York City. Okay. And I was talking to a health club chain. This was like 15 years ago. And it's a prominent health club chain. And the guy who's the head of real estate development said, I'm going to go down to Florida. I think we can do like 3 or 4 clubs there. I said to him, bro, buy a Metro card and do not leave the subway system. Okay. Yeah. Do not leave the subway system. There's plenty of density, and just go find it right here where you've actually got brand equity. You got people, you got resources. Yeah. Like don't leave, don't go to LAX. Don't go to JFK. Don't go to LaGuardia. Just stay on the subway grid. To you saying like, hey, I'm going to saturate New York. Like, that's a great strategy.
I think part of that is, we're restaurateurs, right? And we have a great, at Orify Brands, we have about 120, plus restaurants across 6 different brands. And we did exactly that. We established great brand, recognition and presence and affinity in like a place like Manhattan. And we did it historically. We experimented with going to DC and going to Florida and going to Chicago. And we realized what you're saying, right? It's so hard to expand too quickly, to get ahead of the curve and try to open up other markets when, all the most value really comes from just being smart about where you are and which, understanding your market, understanding more about your consumers. And that's what
I think a lot of people think that, I know we're going a little bit overtime, Dave, but a lot of people think that if I go to a new city, that's like a badge of honor, like I'm in the military, I'm in 12 cities. Okay. We were working with this one group who took in a lot of venture capital, and their biggest market was New York City. And I never got any direct mail from them. I never got an email from them. So when I met them, they're like, yeah, we're in like 30 cities. And I'm like, how do I not know who you are? I live on 29th Street and Fifth Avenue. You guys have never marketed to me, or you never marketed to anyone in the 1,000 people that live in my building, because I would have seen something there. So I think people get excited about expansion and they forgot that there's all this marketing that you could do to like own the market that you're currently in. Just stay where you are, and then grow when like you have nowhere else to go. You know, that's what.
We have so much work to do in New York. I mean, we have so much work to do just in a couple of blocks. You know,
right.
And
that's good.
I think your point is well received, and kind of how we've been thinking about it. But yeah, look, we're excited, and look, this is an audacious goal. I never really woke up as a restaurateur thinking, oh, let's get into digital technology and challenge some of the biggest publicly traded companies in the world. But when you love an industry, when you're passionate about what you do, and the people that are in this industry, it's worth fighting for. And I felt like, as well as my partners, like we were kind of backed in a corner, and we just felt like, if no one else is going to do it, who better to do it than, restaurateurs that have, devoted their professional lives to creating a better industry. So.
Got it. So last question, as you go through this entrepreneurial journey, and you've been in places that are more stable and more predictable, when you wake up in the morning, you know what you're going to do. When you're an entrepreneur, you have no idea what's going to happen. So do you have any quotes or Morganisms that people say like, hey, he's always saying this, or he's kind of keeping us on path, or, put us in check?
I was hoping by the end of this podcast, you guys were going to give me the roadmap to what to do as an entrepreneur.
Don't leave the subway line is like what you're going to call this. The subway
you're right.
Series.
So I was a lacrosse player. My whole life, I played a Division I up at Cornell. And my high school lacrosse coach, who was a maniac, an absolute maniac, used to always say, don't worry about what you can't control. And he used to just like hammer that into us. And to this day, like that still resonates with me. And I just, whether I'm with my boys who, are 11 and 9, or like, you're encountering all the craziness of personal life, fitness, and of course, entrepreneurial endeavors. Like I just always try to remind myself, Josh, don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on the things that are in your control, and establish, the routines and the discipline to get better at those, minor things that, again, are within our purview. So that's something that I always find myself kind of gravitating towards when things get rough.
Yeah, that's great. So somebody said to me one time that I control the things I can't control, and the more things I can't control, it kind of like I control even more. So it's like once you master that part, that's like, oh, give me more, and I'll figure out a way to kind of normalize these things where they don't create chaos. So, but don't go into the M&A business, because there's way more things out of our control than that's a whole podcast series in and of itself.
Honestly, like just to bring it back, like we haven't talked about fitness in general, but like in my personal life, fitness as, I was an athlete, I just mentioned, fitness and overall health and wellness has always been, a big part of my life. And then one of the things I think I love about it so much is that there's not many things in life where you can control literally 100% of the outcome, other than the things that you do for yourself, like how you take care of your body, the things the exercises you choose to do, or, the yoga, so I've always loved health and fitness, mainly because, I just know that it's in my control. There's no one else I can blame. In Sesame, I got to raise money. You're right. It's like, it involves other people. I can do my best, but ultimately it's a dual transaction where I have to get other people to commit. But every day I get up and, I go to the gym, and I think about what I eat, and I, try to do things like meditation, because I just know they're in my control. And hopefully if I do it well, it puts me in a better mindset and a mental space to tackle all of the other challenges that I might not have so much control over,
Yeah. So in closing, because I said this to somebody the other day, an entrepreneur who's been struggling, I said, how many days do you wake up in the morning and you're like thinking about the stress ahead of you, or do you think about the opportunity ahead of you? And if you wake up and you're just like thinking about the stress, you can't really divert that energy into like, how am I going to fix it? Like, you fix it by growing out of the stress. You don't fix it by like focusing on the stress. So
yeah,
I'm with you, man. All right, let's get everybody into the gym. Let's get everyone ordering on Sesame, and don't leave the 5 boroughs if you want to be on Sesame for the next couple of years, because that's the right business model. We're sticking with it.
Yeah.
All right, man. Awesome. Good to see you. And look forward to catching up in person and, build this business methodically. And that's who wins.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.